In the heart of the Indian Territory before it was known as Oklahoma, a conflict simmered and erupted into one of the bloodiest feuds in American history. This wasn't just a dispute over land or cattle, it was a vendetta that spanned 6 years, involving lawmen and outlaws, and leaving a trail of bloodshed in its wake. The Brooks-McFarland Feud, a saga of revenge, betrayal, and murder, tore through families and communities, becoming a dark chapter in the tale of the American frontier. What sparked this deadly rivalry? How did it escalate into a cycle of violence that seemed unstoppable? Join us as we delve into the roots, the key players, and the tragic events of this historical quarrel, uncovering the story of two families locked in a deadly embrace, shaping the destiny of a future state. Welcome to Historical Quarrels. It's going to be a fun one. We'll be going over the Brooks-McFarland Feud, going over the timeline, some of the important events that were happening, get a, good old-fashioned feud going for this episode. A couple of quick things before the episode starts. I know people usually like this when I leave this for the end, but I have been pretty sick this weekend, so I am going to be using a lot of my notes or research. I'm going to be reading from the legendsofamerica.com on the Brooks-McFarland Feud. This was written by Kathy Weiser, or at least it was compiled by Kathy Weiser. So a lot of this was pulled from notes and journals, though. So that being said, anybody that has issues with that, I'm just reading the story. I'm not trying to steal. This is primarily, again, because I just didn't have enough time to write stuff into my own notes. Given excuses, I know, but it is what it is. I haven't been feeling too well. I just wanted to get an episode out, and I don't know. I just feel like I have to. That being said, let's go ahead and get into the episode. I'll talk more about it at the end if you care. If you don't, then you won't listen. So, okay, that's all. Get into it. You are listening to Historical Quarrels. So let's go ahead and start with the Brooks family. Originally hailing from Alabama, the Brooks family made their way to Indian Territory via Texas in 1890. The head of the family in Oklahoma was Willis Brooks, Jr., who had been born to Willis and Louisa Jane, or Jenny Brooks, on April 3rd, 1854, in the hill country of Lawrence County, Alabama. During that Alabama time, Willis Jr. had four brothers: John, the eldest, Gaines, Mac, and Henry, the youngest. During the Civil War, the Brooks family joined the Confederacy, although many of their neighbors remained loyal to the Union. For this, their neighbors were called Tories by the rebels. Willis Brooks Sr. attempted to enlist in the Confederate Army, but he was rejected due to his age. He did, however, become a saddle maker that was attached to a rebel cavalry in 1863. When Willis returned home, he learned that a Tory had been annoying his wife, Louisa Jane, or Jenny, a half-breed Cherokee who was nearly 20 years younger than her husband. Sometime within the next few days, Willis found the man and killed him, because that is what rational people do. But his friends soon retaliated. Willis was shot dead in front of his house, and then, a few days after his funeral, John was killed while working in a field. Mrs. Brooks witnessed the first event, and she claimed that 7 or 8 men were responsible. She then had her sons avenge their father and brother, and by late 1883, the Brooks brothers had killed at least the last of 7 known men who had murdered their father. And they went and got revenge for a dude who got killed because they were also after revenge. So revenge just kind of bred more revenge there. Through their revenge was, though their revenge was seemingly complete, the Brooks continued to harass some of their neighbors. Again, that's what you do when you kill people. And before long, Sheriff Alex Heflin had enough. And on April 14th, 1884, he deputized several men and attempted to make several arrests in the Brooks family. However, a gunfight broke out. in which one member of Sheriff Heflin's posse, a man named Phillips, was killed. Gaines Brooks was also killed, and his younger brother Henry was hit in one of his legs. Part of Henry's leg required amputation, and he became known as Peg Leg Brooks. And that is important to the story later on because you can do something fucking crazy with that leg. That's honestly kind of hilarious. Afterward, what remained of the Brooks family then moved west, settling in Cook County, Texas in 1883. In 1890, they moved again, this time to the Chickasaw Nation in Indian Territory. 4 years later, Willis moved them again, finally settling in Dogtown, which was about 25 miles west of Eufaula in the Creek Nation. The area of the Dogtown settlement was a lush, lawless country between North Canadian and South Canadian rivers. There, the family prospered as farmers and ranchers. Finally getting away from just killing and shooting people and, being mad at the North and stuff. Just going back to farming, ranching, getting that honest living. Somewhere along the lines, Willis married and would have 6 sons and at least 2 daughters. These kids were named Thomas, Clifton, John, Earl, Marion, Willis III, Francis, and Layla. When she was old enough, Francis married Columbus Winfield, Sam Baker, who was also from Alabama and would support the Brooks family in their dispute with the McFarlands. Together, Sam and Francis had several children, one of whom was named Billy Brooks. Now it's kind of enough of the Brooks family. Let's go ahead and get into the McFarland's backstory. Just a tiny bit of it, though. Not as well documented as the Brooks. So the McFarland faction, not nearly as large as the Brooks family. The McFarlands also had an unsavory reputation before their arrival in Oklahoma, or the territory that would become known as Oklahoma later. Jim McFarland, the leader, was said to have been a murderous cattle rustler in Kentucky. He too settled near Dogtown, about 4 miles north of the Brooks Ranch. There, he married a Creek woman named Sarah Watson. So, both of these families are basically assholes. It's just a bunch of assholes fighting each other, which, it kind of makes you feel a little less sympathy for the people involved. Besides, maybe the kids who aren't actively being assholes, but they're being bred by assholes to then become even more of an asshole later. But, besides the point. Anyway, sometime later, Jim was joined by his 2 brothers, Sam and Joe, as well as Sarah's brother, Sandy Watson, and another Native American named Bill Franklin. That probably wasn't his real name. I guarantee you that was a name that he was forced to have. The McFarland family was also supported by an old man named George Riddle and his son, Alonzo Lon Riddle, who owned a ranch to the northwest of the Brooks-McFarland homes. Okay. So, now that we have that backstory and some details set, go ahead and get into the feud. As we know, the feud began with the death of Thomas Brooks on April 24th, in 1896. Living in Dogtown was an old Texas Ranger who was said to have stashed a large amount of money. And when Thomas attempted to rob the Ranger, he was shot and killed. Willis Brooks claimed that Thomas was enticed by Jim McFarland to commit the robbery, but then told the Ranger beforehand. So essentially, Willis was mad that Thomas had gone and robbed someone, died, but then, wanted to blame this other guy for essentially setting him up. It was a setup, a classic setup, but for what reason, the world will never know why. Willis soon confronted Jim with his suspicions, to which McFarland said that Thomas had been involved with the gang of thieves who intended to rob the Ranger, but that Thomas had gotten greedy and tried to pull the job alone. And Willis didn't believe him, and harboring a grudge, the feud slowly escalated, with both sides vowing to shoot each other on sight. And in 1898, Henry Pegleg Brooks was arrested by Deputy Marshal Frank Jones for stealing horses and put in jail at Chandler, Oklahoma. And while he's incarcerated, a family member began to deliver him food goods, including syrup, quote unquote. However, this syrup was actually acid, which Henry applied to the metal bars of his jail cell in a plan to make his escape. However, the famous sheriff of Lincoln County, Bill Tillman, discovered the quote-unquote syrup and foiled the escape attempt. And Henry was later convicted but received a pardon and was released on July 11th, 1902, just a few weeks before the Spokagees shootout. But isn't that crazy? The family came up with this, honestly, like, not terrible plan to drop off food and, like, have some syrup as or like acid disguised as syrup to, pour in metal bars. Honestly, more well thought out than I would give most of these people from back then. However, wouldn't it be funnier if, like, they mixed it up at one point, like they just kept mixing it up and it was just syrup he was pouring on the bars, or like at home instead of syrup they had acid, and so like they're all consuming acid and just that it's funnier in my head, but honestly, I had a good chuckle thinking about that. Just like, Mom, what's on these pancakes? It tastes like burning. It tastes like death. Yeah, I'm a little dead inside right now, a little sick. Anyways, continuing on. In January of 1899, Jim McFarland got into an argument over a bill with a man named John Johnson at a general store in Dogtown. Later that day, Jim shot and killed Johnson during a gunfight in front of Joe McFarland's house. Johnson was struck by 5 bullets, 2 in the head and 1 through the hip and bowels, and 2 more in both thighs. Giving that old boom, 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 boom. At least he didn't shoot him in the dick. That's, go for him. Jim was unharmed, and it is not known if Johnson was able to return fire before being killed. 1 year later, in January of 1900, Jim was tried for Johnson's murder in Muskogee, or Muskogee, Oklahoma. But the only witnesses were his brothers. Because there was a lack of evidence to prove that Johnson was not killed in self-defense, Jim was acquitted and allowed to return home. Which kind of feels like some bullshit right there. It's like, but at the same time, that is the justice system, right? If you don't have enough evidence to prove something wasn't done, they probably shouldn't go to jail. But sometimes it's just like when and when the family comes from like a line of assholes who are like known for doing criminal shit, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like it's better to err on the side of he probably did it. But that could be wrong. He could be putting away good people doing that. So, yeah, I get it. Anyways, Jim later accumulated several other charges against him. See, at this point, this is where you should start thinking, okay, maybe he did just fucking kill him. Like he did kill him. So maybe we should just like fuck the his brothers, being the witnesses and find, just kind of be like, hey, we're adding this on and we know you did it. Don't even try. But these charges that he would rack up included assault with the intent to kill, but all were pending. Jim then decided to fake his own death to elude the authorities. Sometime in 1901, Jim had been released on bail and was working for a cattle company in Okemaw. Oh, this is McFarland, by the way. This is Jim McFarland. So in case you're confused, but if it was the Brooks or the McFarlands, this is Jim McFarland doing that here. But anyway, sometime in 1901, Jim had been released on bail and was working for a cattle company in Okemaw when he stole $3,000 from his employers and fled to Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. Classic. I'm glad that lots of criminals have been doing this for a couple hundred years now at this point. You rob and then you flee to Mexico and try to, hopefully not get found. I bet it was a lot harder to be found back in the days. 2 days later, his horse wandered home riderless with blood on the saddle and a bullet shot in a bolt hole near the edge. The police suspected that the Brooks family was responsible, and they organized a posse to search the area for Jim's remains. That's right, because this feud had been going on because Jim faked his death. The immediate thought was, oh, the Brooks killed him. Brooks family killed him, and we need to go find his body. Jim's plan might have worked, but a year later, in August of 1902, he tried to contact his family and was discovered by the authorities. Jim surrendered and quickly posted a $1,000 bond. The charge of assault with the intent to kill was dropped due to the lack of evidence. This guy's getting off. Just not enough evidence to convict him ever. Must have had like a really goddamn good lawyer. And Jim's former employers forgave him for taking the money after he claimed that he was ambushed and abducted to Mexico by some bandits. In no time, with Jim's troubles seemingly behind him, he was soon back to his old habits. By the summer of 1902, the Fort Smith and Western Railway Company was building a line from Fort Smith, Arkansas, to Guthrie, Oklahoma, and approaching the Dogtown area. The present-day location of Dustin, Oklahoma, was chosen as the site of a new railroad town, which was to be named Spokane, a Creek word meaning near to God. The new town was to be located right in the area between the Brooks and McFarland homes, and neither family was very happy about it. Regardless, plans for the railroad proceeded, and the townsite company purchased 320 acres from the Creek Nation and began selling $25 lots and building a train station at the new site. A large celebration opening day sale was scheduled for July 1st of 1902, which was just a few weeks before Jim's return to Mexico. It was interrupted, though, by a confrontation between the two feuding families that came very close to becoming deadly. John Brooks, Willis's son, and Alonzo Riddle, a McFarland supporter, began arguing about something. Nobody knows what. Probably over, who killed who, or just something dumb, and then it turned into, more bullshit. But quickly, an old Confederate named G.G. Tyson disarmed Riddle and led the two young men behind a building to fight with their fists. When the fight started, Brooks began hitting Riddle with brass knuckles and knocked him to the ground. So Tyson intervened again to take the weapon away. However, before the fight returned, John's brother-in-law, Sam Baker, armed himself with his rifle and pointed at Riddle. A man named Jesse Hill, a townsite promoter who was standing nearby, pushed Baker's rifle toward the ground and said, "Don't act a fool." Baker then released his hold on the rifle, drew his revolver, and pointed it at Hill's face. Another townsite promoter and U.S. Deputy Marshal named Morton Rutherford then armed himself and pointed his weapon at Sam Baker, where the latter's 16-year-old son, Bill, grabbed his rifle and pointed it at Rutherford. So we had this is like a classic Mexican standoff happening here. Like those joke ones you see nowadays where it's just like people just pointing guns at each other, seemingly out of nowhere, and all of a sudden everyone has a gun. Legitimately, what happened here? The situation was very tense for a moment, but a cool-headed man named Cliff Spear managed to defuse the situation by slowly lowering Rutherford's rifle barrel and allowing Sam a chance to leave. When Sam was out of firing range, Bill lowered his weapon as well, and they both left to tell Willis. And before long, Willis Brooks and his cohorts, each mounted and armed, rode up to do battle. Then Mr. Rutherford stepped in again and spoke to the leaders of both sides, talking them down from what might have been a deadly gunfight. The event took its toll on the would-be new town. Though lots sold, the town wouldn't boom. And although Spokane quickly grew to support a population of 150 people, the residents were nervous, especially when the McFarland or the Brooks families rode in heavily armed. That made me a little nervous too. It'd be like moving into, I don't know, just like an area where there's a heavy amount of gang activity, or think like the Crips and the Bloods, you're on the border between the Crips and the Bloods, or where Crips and Bloods will have activity and they're going to interact, and they're probably going there's been fist fights and screaming and yelling just constantly. And it's it's just going to end up in a shootout. That's probably what was happening in all these other residents' minds. And they're like, oh, fuck. Why did we move here, John? What the hell is wrong with you? You knew the Brooks and the McFarlands were here. We heard about it before we moved here. But what, it was $25? Who cares? Now I'm going to get shot. It's all your fault, John. Thanks, John, you dick. God damn it, John. God damn it. Something like that. But even with that, and everyone knowing it was going to happen, it still happened. Rutherford was not going to be able to prevent that from going on forever. And so we eventually do get to the Spokagee's shootout. The one battle had been avoided. The feud was far from over. After the July 1st incident, the McFarland faction was ready to kill the Brooks whenever the opportunity presented itself. And that opportunity came on September 22nd of 1902. After a thunderstorm passed over the area, at the Brooks Ranch, the rain scattered some of the cattle and prevented the men from working the farm. Because of this, Henry, Pegleg Brooks, and his nephew Earl went out to round up the livestock, while Willis and two of his other sons, Clifton and John, mounted up to ride into town for the mail. Meanwhile, the McFarlands and the Riddles had anticipated their arrival, due to the rain. They came up with a plan to ambush Brooks in town, but in a way that made it appear as though it was self-defense. The McFarlands took up positions across the street from the post office and then sent George Riddle out to take care of some errands. However, Riddle's real intention was to confront the Brooks and provoke a fight. It's a planned way to essentially instigate hostilities and legally getting you out of some trouble for murdering someone. Basically, back in the day, that's how you did it. When Willis and his sons rode into town later that morning, they dismounted and tied their horses up in front of the post office. Then, as the three were entering the building, Riddle came out of the door with his mail. The Brooks immediately began making threats, and Riddle said something to the effect, "Kill me if you want. I am unarmed and have but one time to die." The plan worked perfectly. Willis and his sons cursed Riddle and then drew their weapons on him. But he hastily ran across the street to Morton Rutherford, who was standing in front of his office and requested protection. Rutherford called out to Willis and demanded peace, but before he could finish his sentence, Willis fired a shot at Riddle with his revolver. The bullet struck Riddle in the head, and he fell to Rutherford's feet. Which, poor Riddle, that fucking sucks, right? This guy who's been like a friend to the McFarland family, they essentially just use him as like a little honeypot, essentially, and then the honeypot gets killed here. Fucking sucks. But anyways, after hitting George Riddle in the head, Willis wasted precious time by running up to him and shooting him twice more. God, Rutherford probably just someone, possibly Rutherford, then fired on Willis and struck him in his right hip. Willis jumped into the air and then fell face down in the mud. He got back up a moment later and began firing, but was then hit in the chest and killed. Clifton Brooks was struck multiple times, once in the leg, once in the neck, and once more in the chest. But he was able to survive the initial volley and make a run for it, which, goddamn, you get shot. And this is like the back in the day bullets, like when they, I guess they wouldn't be like balls, but like, oh man, these, I don't know, that's crazy to think that this dude would get shot. What is that? 1, 2, 3 times. And he got shot 3 times, and then but was still able to keep booking for it and try to run. It was Alonzo Riddle and Jim McFarland then chased him down on horseback and killed him. John Brooks was shot through and through and found lying near the back door of the post office. Having been struck by a steel-jacketed bullet immediately after the shooting ceased, Rutherford arrested Jim, Joe, and Alonzo and then delivered them to Deputy Marshal Grant Johnson, in Eufaula by wagon. The 3 men were placed in Eufaula jail and went before the county commissioner's court 2 days later on September 24th. All 3 were charged with murder and released on bonds to await trial. John Brooks was also charged with murder, but he remained in Spokane because of his critical condition. The town doctor expected John to die of blood poisoning, but he survived and lived to the 1950s. So, goddamn, that is impressive. Willis and Clifton were buried in Chicotah next to Thomas Brooks, who died in 1896. Less than 3 weeks after the gunfight at Spokane, Jim McFarland was killed in an ambush on October 10th, 1902. Jim and his wife were returning home from Welikta in their buggy, and as they approached a river near the old Watsonville, someone opened fire on them with a rifle. One steel-jacketed bullet struck Jim in the back, and he died a few minutes later. Henry, Pegleg Brooks, and Sam Baker were the prime suspects, but there was no evidence, and neither of them were arrested. Some local citizens believe that McFarland was killed by a member of his own faction, but in any event, nobody was ever charged for the crime. The death of Jim McFarland marked the end of the feud. John Brooks left the area after recuperating from his wounds. And in 1905, Henry was arrested for stealing horses again and sentenced to 10 years in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. When he was paroled on January 10th of 1911, Henry went home to Lawrence County, Alabama, where he took care of his aging mother and became a bootlegger. Once in crime, you're always in crime. That's how you do it. On January 11th, 1920, Henry was surrounded at his still by a posse under the command of Sheriff John Robinson. Though he was completely outnumbered, Henry chose to resist and began firing his revolver. Man, this guy did not want to go out without a fight. Fucking warriors, man, but like assholes. Asshole warriors. The posse then retaliated and struck Henry 12 times. He died about 15 minutes later. So after getting shot 15 times, he lived, was in pain for about 15 minutes, and then died. Just picture that. Just kind of enjoy that image. And Sam Baker also died violently. In 1911, Sam became involved in a dispute with the Chickasaw merchant who shot him in the back. Old Jenny Brooks outlived all of her sons, and she would die on March 29th, 1924, at the age of 98. And is said to have been proud that all of her sons had died like men with their boots on. God damn, woman. Why would you be proud of that? They were fucking thieves, man. They were thieves, murderers, and assholes. So dumb. As for the McFarland faction, all of those arrested were later acquitted, and they continued living in the area. The Fort Smith and Western Railway tracks finally reached Spokane on April 1st, 1903, and soon after the town was renamed to Dustin. Interesting bit of history here. Interesting bit of lore. That brings us to the end of today's historical quarrel. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to today's episode. It was an interesting one for sure. I definitely wish I could have done a bit more research, found a bit more notes, went over a few more things rather than just kind of retelling what was written down. But it was interesting enough that I think just verbalizing it, giving some audio to it for, I don't know, my listeners, you guys, and those who might be wanting to look a little more into it. At the very least, it's, they don't have to go on a website and just like read something. But I do appreciate, again, Kathy Wazer and Legends of America. Thank you guys for having this. It did make the story, I feel like, a lot more digestible and easier to, like, it was just a good broken down form for a short episode today. For those of you that prefer this and don't like as much of the deep divey long form episodes that I typically do, let me know in the comments. Or let me know through email at historicalquarrels@gmail.com. And for those of you who are here just for the story, just wanted to know like this bit of lore, American history lore. That's kind of it. I'm gonna give my thoughts on it a little bit. Be talking some more personal stuff, kind of like I did at the beginning, and then going over some future plans here in this part. So for those of you who were here just for that, thank you for listening. You have a good one. See ya. For those of you who are staying, thanks for staying. Love you guys. Okay. So my thoughts on it were, this story is fucking crazy. From syrup getting poured on metal that was, fake syrup that was acid, to a Mexican standoff happening right before the actual shootout began. Families just moving in and building up a town around these like two outlaw factions, essentially, who are warring with each other is crazy. I do wish I would have had more time to go in and get more journal entries or notes, or like find other families and like their thoughts and stuff on the family, on the two families, at least families that were living around there. I don't know, it just would have been cool to kind of get that. And if you guys prefer me to do a long form episode, I think this is going to be an episode that I'll just redo later and do that sort of like deep dive, get a whole bunch of different perspectives and different sides, tales about what happened. It'd be interesting. It'd be fun. For those of you who don't, I don't know. I guess it just depends. If people just kind of like the short formats, I think that's what I'll do. Is I'll just stick to shorter and shorter episodes. And you guys will just start seeing shorter and shorter episodes. Though hopefully they'll be tighter, a little more consistent than today's episode. So there's that. Sorry, real quick. I just need to sip here. So yeah, I was it's crazy. My kid got sick this week with the I think the flu. And then my wife got sick, and then what was crazy is the week before this last week, I was sick with like a cold. Got better. And then my kid got sick, and so I thought I had passed it on to him. But then whatever he had got passed to my wife. My wife gave it to me, and I started like I'm pretty sure it was the flu because like it just dude, I don't know. It was awful. It was not fun. Still kind of recovering today. My tummy hurts a little bit, but it's doing better now. Definitely not as bad as yesterday. Oh, yesterday was awful. But yeah, so for those of you wondering why, that's why today's episode is much shorter, much less meatified, how I like to do things. So yeah. For those of you who were expecting that and wanted that, I am sorry, but just know I'm doing my best. Did my best to get what I could out to you. Hopefully it worked out. For those of you that listen to Hard Homies, you'll actually see the exact moment when we're recording next Thursday where I get sick, or you'll hear it where like I start getting sick. It's kind of funny. Speaking of which, let me know how you guys are enjoying that show too. If you are listening to it, or if you like it at all, if you think it kind of detracts from the. I don't know, I'm just curious to hear what you guys' thoughts are on the Hard Homies podcast, the other podcast I do with my buddies. That one's a lot more free form, and I don't know. It's just kind of us shooting the shit and just talking with each other. So if you like listening to people who do that, like listen to some buddies talk, and just kind of being the final on the wall for like conversations like that, that's definitely the show for you. Definitely how we treat it. We just try to talk to each other like normal. We are planning on doing some like, because my buddy's moving back to Utah from where he's at right now, and when he does, we want to do like more video game streaming stuff like we used to in the past in high school, and so you guys might be seeing me do that more. Yeah, so again, if you're interested in that, look it up. I'll probably leave links or something to it in episodes where that will be coming up. I don't know. You can also just follow us on socials, and we'll probably just announce it there. Other than that, I don't know. Today I'm a little out of it. Still kind of recovering, so not a whole lot extra. But I love you guys. If you like today's episode, again, share it, leave a rating, leave a review. If you didn't like it, even let me know. Honestly, tell me what I can do better. I'm open to criticism, and I'm never gonna shoot that down. I will like try and respond to it and be like, hey, like this is what I was trying to do. Or if I feel like the criticism was kind of misrepresenting what my show is, and like they essentially want me to inherently change what I'm doing with the show, then it's like, well, I'm doing the show for me, and I'm trying to have fun with it. So it's. I'm not going to turn it into a show that you want to do. If you want to do your show like that, then that's fine. If I want to do the show like how I do it, and, where it's the more free form, I'll make quips, jokes. Again, today I was just kind of dead, so probably not as funny. So I'm sorry about that. But, that's... But then, even then, I'll still try and look into it and be like, okay, so, they probably didn't find anything funny, so I need to make the jokes better. Make it funnier, or I need to make something else more interesting, a little more charismatic, a little more drawing for the episode, so that way they don't. I don't know. Sometimes it's if they're saying like this sucked, like why does it suck? You know, like do I just need to make how I say things a little better, stuff like a little smoother? You know, it's just stuff like that I try to interpret from the comments where it's pretty generalized and you can't pull a lot from it, like a lot of specifics. So that's what I try to do with those. But again, if I respond to it, no, it's probably because like what you're saying, like while you may have some like ideas for how you'd want a show to go, this is just not that show. You know, it's just not that show. That being said, though, I will still try and take something from it. You know, like if I feel like, yeah, this episode definitely had too many jokes, there's not enough facts. Then it's like, yeah, I get that. But if it didn't, then I don't know if I that. But anyway, I'm rambling now. This is what I do at the end of the episodes. I ramble. But yeah, love you guys. You all have a good one. I'll see you next week. Bye.